Today is Thursday, December 22nd, 2016, and we are interviewing Steve Glovna at the Aptos Public Library in Aptos, California. My name is Jeannie Zarnicki. David Addison is recording, and Julie Richardson will be indexing the video. We all work for the Santa Cruz Public Libraries, and Dean Kaufman is observing. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. So Steve, tell us your birth date and where you were born.
Well, I was born in Stockton, Montana, and that was in, I was born in, well, what was it? It's 5/15, May 15th, 1924.
Okay. And what was your branch of service in the war that you served in?
Well, I went into the Navy, and because I had experienced some things out at Fort Lewis when I was doing some, well, I was with a company that was servicing the fort, and I had been a sort of a helper with their painter who did all their trucks and so on. And this was a Saturday, and we happened to go out there at a request from the Army at Fort Lewis because they had run out of beverages for the service people there. And this company that I was working there, but I was really a sort of a helper to the sign painter that did all their advertising and trucks, actually painted their trucks with their logos, etc. And it was a Saturday, actually, an odd day, and so the two men who owned the beverage company actually had, I was working with the sign painter there on a Saturday, and they got a call from Fort Lewis saying that they needed beverages, soft drinks and beer, and so the two brothers who owned the company had loaded up the truck, and they called us across the street in the warehouse and asked the sign painter to drive this load out to Fort Lewis and to take me with to help, unload the truck. So that was fine. We drove out, and that was I knew about Fort Lewis because we'd go down. My folks liked to go down to Olympia, down to the Capitol, and so on. We'd just pass it, and it was a huge facility. I don't know how many 100 acres they had there, but they even had an airfield, which was unusual. The Army was in charge of the Air Force at that time. But anyway, so we went out there, and it happened to be a rainy day, which was not unusual for Washington. Tacoma, Washington was pretty wet. So we got out there, and we didn't have to unload the truck. We were by their PX, and people came out, soldiers came out and unloaded our truck and so on. And so we were just sitting in the cab, and all of a sudden this fairly large group of soldiers with all their heavy equipment, everything that they could possibly carry, and I'd never seen that before, and they came marching up, and the sergeant there stopped them. It was noontime. It just so happened it was right at noon, and the cafeteria was right next to the building that the recreation building where we were to unload our things. But the soldiers came out from there, and they were unloading. So we were just sitting in the cab, and all of a sudden, as I said, these soldiers with all this equipment, on them, marched up, and they were just standing at ease after the sergeant that was in charge. And then all of a sudden, I was watching, and we noticed all the soldiers going into the cafeteria because it was lunchtime. But these guys, with all their equipment and everything, they were just standing there with all their gear and in this rain. And I had talked to my friend there and said, why are they standing there? And he said, looks like they've been on bivouac. And that area was just huge. They had all sorts of areas that almost representative, parts of what was happening in the war. And then they had an airfield out there also. So anyway, so I thought, well, that's interesting. Well, why are they standing there? Well, they're on bivouac. Well, what does that mean? Well, this is like they're actually, marching and trying to be taught what they're going to experience. So I said, well, that's interesting. I said, well, why aren't they going? It's noontime. How come they're just standing there? And he says, well, I don't know why there's, but anyway, all of a sudden, this truck, canvas top truck, army truck, pulls up by these guys that are in the just standing there, and two men, I guess they were soldiers, jump out of the cab. They're all in white. They have white aprons and wearing white stuff. They drop the tailgate, and they've got these big pots in the truck. And I said, what's going on? And my friend, the driver, said, I don't know. It looks like these guys are going to have to eat there. I said, well, that's crazy. And they said, well, yeah, but they're on bivouac and they're trying to learn about things that's going to happen when they get out in the field. And I said, well, I guess that makes sense. But boy, that's... So anyway, here they are. The cooks, they line up, they come up one after another, get their stuff, and the cooks are putting it on their mess plate and everything, and they're eating it out, in the rain. And I thought, this is the craziest thing I ever saw. And he said, yeah, but that's what's going to happen. That's what they're going to encounter when they get out where they're, and they have to learn about all these. And so I said, man, I was in high school and my graduation was soon, and I said, I'd already received a card, that I would be called up because I was 18. And I said, well, the Army is not for me, just not for me. I don't want to go to the Army. So with that experience, when I got home, I talked to my dad and I said, I told him what happened, and he said, well, what can you do about it? I said, well, I can go down and try to join the Navy. And he said, what? I said, yes. I said, I don't want to be out there, in the mud and everything, and try to eat in the rain and all that kind of stuff. And he said, well, if that's what you want, well, that's what we'll do. So we had to go down to town, and the Navy had, a recruiting station there. So there was a line, and we were in a line, and we got there up to my turn, and they asked me for my card that I'd received, and so it was, okay, you're going to join, what do you, I want to join the Navy. Okay, so they said, all right, what's your name? And I said, Steve Glovna. And my dad, pokes me in the rib, and he says, it's Stephen. And the guy had already written it down. He says, not any longer, it's Steve. I'm not going to change this, because he'd already started writing. So that's changed my name, from Stephen to Steve. So anyway, so I got my enlisted, into the Navy, and they said, we'll call you up. Well, this was, I guess, the 1st of December, and I thought, well, how soon? Well, we don't know, you'll just get called. They'll let you know. 2 days before Christmas, I got a call, and I was really disappointed about that, But anyhow, Dad says, well, that's your fault. You wanted to go there, you know. So we try to, you know, celebrate our Christmas early. And sure enough, I got called up and had a report and had to go down the train station. And they, this was late in the afternoon, and we got on board train, and we found out we were headed for Farragut, Idaho, from where we are in Tacoma, Washington. And so I said, why Farragut, Idaho? Well, there's a huge lake there, and the Navy has, you know, a place there, a large place where they do training and so on, and they have access to the lake, you know, for boats, so you learn about some things and swimming in the water, etc. So I said, okay, fine. So I spent the time there, and then eventually, after, I don't know how long it was, but it was about a month at least of training, and a lot of marching and different classes and so on. And so got through that, and then nothing came up for a while, so that then I just went into the camp thing and into a barracks, and waited for time to be called up. Well, it wasn't too long, and eventually got called up and came down to Shoemaker that was in California here, and the Navy had a place. I thought that was kind of odd because that was south of San Francisco, and I can't remember exactly what it's close to, but we were there for a while, and we had you know, a Navy lieutenant and so on. We did a lot of marching, and I thought, why are we marching so much? You know, we're in the Navy. But anyhow, that was all drilling and this type of thing, and eventually got my notice and to report to Treasure Island. And so, okay, so I got on Treasure Island. We were there for a short time, and then I got called up and said, we have a ship for you. And then I had to go over to San Francisco, and there was a destroyer there, and that was the Balch, and its number was 363. And it seemed like a, you know, pretty large ship, but as you know, for a destroyer, it wasn't that large. And they still had the old World War I destroyers, and they were using those, and they were building new destroyers, which were 2,100 tons. Our ship was 1,800 tons, and it had 5-inch guns on it and so on. But they only they elevated 45 degrees, which was all right, I guess, at that time. So I got on the ship, and I was just in the crew, you know, and so I was in the deck crew, which was all the hard work and all the painting and scraping and the dirty work, you know, cleaning up. And I soon found out that I didn't want to stay on the deck crew and try to find if I could get into something else. And as it so turned out that there was an opening in radar and sonar. So I put in for it, and then I got accepted, but I had no rating or anything. But I had some good people there, and well, I was on the deck force for a while, but I wanted to get off of that. And then when that opened up, I took that and got up there, and the chief officer there, great guy, and so, you know, he really was a good instructor too. So eventually, the sonar and radar areas right behind the captain and on the main deck of operating the ship, where they could see overall. There was the highest place on the ship, and we were, just a wall between us, a metal wall, but we're right behind, because the idea was that if we picked up on sonar, a submarine or something, we were supposed to plot it on where it was and so on, and then give all that information to the officer of the deck, which was right, on the same level, or for radar for aircraft. So anyway, I just ended up, I was, learning both of them, but so the officer there felt that we should know each one, depending on, if we had problems or somebody got sick or hurt, that we could operate both items, both radar and sonar, and also do plotting, because what good is the information? You've got a contact, but you have to tell the officer of the deck where it is, and so on, and that's why you plotted the distances and etc. And so I eventually, I worked on both radar and sonar and learned to do plotting, but I was a non-rater. I didn't have a rating of any kind. But after a while, I learned enough that I was able to, when we got down the Pacific to get my stripe, I end up being a Sonarman. That's what opened up. So during the war, I never gone beyond that, because the crew was, we didn't lose anybody up there, and there was no opportunity to advance. So but I took the test and everything passed, and I ended up with third class Sonarman. So that I went through all the whole war with that. And so life on ship, I learned to live that way, and actually I kept thinking, this is so much better than sloshing around in the mud at the army and so on. And so I was, quite happy. And we just had a good crew up there, and we worked together so good. And we had the highest rating man there was such a good guy, and he was good at explaining things, and it was easy to learn things from him and so on. So I felt good there, was comfortable. And eventually we were sent down to down to the Pacific, but we didn't get right into the area. We end up down in the French islands and that was south of what was happening up at the Guadalcanal and all that area. But eventually we did get up through Guadalcanal, and it was, a terrible sight to see, because you come into, and it's a narrow kind of body of water along this long island, and there were, they must have been 20 or 30 ships that were ships of all kinds, not destroyers or any Navy ships, but ships that carried food or ammunition and so on, and that got stopped blowing up and so on, and had to be beached on. And so that sort of was scary to see when we came back past that. And of course, on Guadalcanal, the Japanese held that for quite a while. But then you went a little further, and then there was a little island there, and we were heading right at the island, and I couldn't figure out what we're doing, because I couldn't see where the opening was. But the island wasn't that small either, but so we entered that, and there's just a channel going in, and then there's this large body of water inside of this island. and the Navy had used this as a port of bringing in ammunition, oil, etc. And so that was my first, experience with seeing what was going on. And of course, that island was just, really kind of scary to see how many ships had been damaged and so on. And there were still Japanese, I think, on the other side of the island. Yet there was still some fighting. But anyway, that was my entry into that. And so we found we were attached then. Well, we weren't attached to any group to begin with, but we were assigned to, because there were still submarines coming in, Japanese submarines coming in as close as Guadalcanal, and they were trying to pick off all the ships supplying supplies for the American soldiers and so on for the Army. And so what we went on patrol was to protect these ships coming in with oil and food and ammunition, and they were going into this little harbor in there, and we did pick up a submarine once, and actually we notified the ship that was just ahead of us going into the little island protection, and the Japanese submarine had deployed a torpedo, and we picked up I was on the bridge at the time, and we picked up the sonic sound of it, and then advised the freighter in front of us to go fast, go full speed. There's a torpedo on the way, and it just missed the rear of that. Say we could actually see it, because it came up more, and you could see it coming. So it came between us and the other ship, and just eventually went off. And I don't know, we didn't hear anything more about it, because it didn't explode. It didn't hit anything. So that was my first experience in war, and it was kind of a scary situation to think that there are all these, what could happen. But from there on, we did this particular job of protecting tankers and ammunition ships coming in to that little place, Tulagi Harbor, and unloading, so to supply the Navy, all the ships. And then eventually we were attached to a group which had other destroyers, and then the battleships, and I can't think of the other one that's in between right now, but we hadn't gone into any landings at that time. So we did this for quite some time, and so we were pretty safe where we were, but eventually we got news that we are going to be attached to a group now that was going in on some landings, and so we were then with other destroyers and cruisers. There were the larger, and then the battleships. So we came in, and then all these troop ships came in and landing. The Japanese were all up in the hills there on this particular area. I don't remember the name of that area, but it took us a while to get there. And we were, fortunately, our groups the Americans were making progress and moving the Japanese further and further away from where we were. And so when we went in for this landing, where the Marines and the soldiers had to deploy, get off the ships on the landing craft, and then the beach was, not deep, so it wasn't like, a mile or so, but it was, I don't know how far, but it seemed like, maybe 500 feet or maybe a little bit more before the cliff started. Well, what we found out that the Japanese were all up in there. They had dug tunnels in these hills there, and so they were. And then they had openings, so they knew landings were coming, and so that's what they did, so they could fire down on the soldiers landing and so on. And we went into that one landing, and anyway, it was awful. To see the Marines and soldiers having to land on that beach, and how they were, just being, just massacred. It was terrible. So that was my first real experience with the war, and I was so happy that I felt sorry for these guys, but I was just happy that I was on a ship and not one of them, and it was just a terrible experience. But see, we were firing with our anti-aircraft guns. We had 50 millimeter and 20 millimeter that could move up and down, but our 5-inch guns, which we needed, wouldn't elevate beyond 45 degrees, and some of these had to go up higher because those cliffs were just very, very high, mountainous kind of things. And so that's where our ship its defect was that the new destroyers were all coming out where they could elevate almost 90 degrees, so they could do this kind of thing and shoot high, and even for aircraft. We had a lot of 20 millimeter and 50 millimeter anti-aircraft, and we used those, but they didn't destroy as much of the mountain as a 5-inch round would. So anyway, that was my first experience. But I was just fortunate that we went with some other groups and so on, and in some landings. But eventually, when the kamikaze started, our ship actually became I had a problem because we couldn't elevate our guns high enough, and so they decided to send us back to the States and have all that overhauled and then return back with the equipment that we needed. So they sent us back to the East Coast, and I don't, because that's where they had all the equipment and all the shipyards that could do that, and we didn't have enough shipyards of, the Navy could use on the West Coast. So that was an interesting trip, coming through the Panama Canal and so on, and coming up the East Coast. But when we got there, there wasn't yard availability for our work, so they sent us down to the southern part of, I forget the place right now, but where we start picking up convoys that was supplying the European war, And we were sending a lot of what am I saying? Ships across with material, for the Army and air, whatever, if we had any air bases, but we didn't have anything over there except England and so on. We had more airplanes there than any place else, but we did convoy these ships, and it was carrying ammunition and food and all the rest that they needed. And the Germans were just picking off these stragglers. And there was always in these big convoys that might have 30 or 40 ships in a convoy, and we're going around trying to protect them from being torpedoed. And sometimes, a ship would have these old merchant ships would break down, and they would we couldn't do anything. We couldn't stay there to protect them because we had all these other things. And those poor people, they got picked off by the German submarines. But we had a lot of contacts. We dropped a lot of depth charges. They look like a big oil drum. They go off, and then they go. We could set the depth charge. We could pick up the submarine on the sonar, and we could actually tell them how deep, because we could figure that out. So that was what I was doing. So we could tell them how deep to drop the depth charges and so on. And you never, I don't recall whether we ever hit a submarine or not, but we did pick up some survivors off of some of these merchant ships and so on, but we couldn't leave the merchant ships because it's a matter of what you do. You pick up, save a few people or a lot of people, and so it's a difficult. But that fortunately was the captain's, responsibility. So we did that for a while, and then eventually we got yard availability, and about that we got back to the States, and we went down and I forgot where it was. It was the southern part of the country on the East Coast, and we got into the shipyard and to overhaul our destroyer. But by time I was on the crew was still there, and then the war actually ended, and so I ended up on I don't know why, but I was happened to be one of the people on the destroyer that was on a decommissioning. It's an interesting process, and that the Navy has when they decommission the ship, take it out of service. And so I ended up on the East Coast, and the war was ending, so I was there, and then the war ended, and so that's really kind of my story. So eventually, we stayed back in barracks, and our destroyer actually they started to work on it, as I said, and to rebuild it, but then they had built so many new destroyers that they decided it wasn't worth the money, and the war was over, to spend all that money. So then the decommissioning process took place, and not everybody on crew could stay, because they were regular Navy. A lot of them were regular Navy, not like myself. I was in the Navy, all right, but I wasn't, like regular Navy, was going to be their life, life as and so, but it was a very interesting, situation, and I just feel so humbled that, I got all the breaks the way they came and was able to survive. And I saw us when we were back there waiting for the war to end. Well, actually, to redo our ship. We stopped at North Africa, and so we came into some French. I don't remember the French colony there in North Africa, but it was an interesting, kind of experience of seeing people. And North Africa was pretty much. They've driven all the Germans away from there, and so the French and British had colonies there, and they were there. So we went by Gibraltar and all that, which was very, very interesting to see, Gibraltar. So after that, got home, and that was the end of my service. So.
What did you do after that?
Yeah.
Did you go to school, or did you work? What did you do?
Pardon?
As a civilian, what did you do after that?
I ended up doing quite a number of different things. I've always been very curious and so on. And the thing was that after I got, the war was over, and there was a GI Bill, which was a great thing. So, because my parents were, just hardworking and not they had never had, college or even high school, so they were just hardworking people. And so with the GI Bill, I decided to take advantage of it and go to college. And I'd always liked art, but I never did much of it, and I did some. In fact, just by doing some things, like doing some sign painting, little signs for this little cafeteria down near the Puyallup Highway, which from Tacoma goes to Puyallup. That's east of Tacoma. And there was a little restaurant down there, and I had a paper route, and that was my last place. And so the gal that had a real nice person, she'd always give me some coffee or something when I'd come down with the paper. And so I noticed that she was trying to make some little signs about something. And so I said, I can do that for you. So I made some signs for her. And she was very, very appreciative. And because of that, that's how I ended up hearing about this guy who was a real sign painter and so on, that worked for this beverage company, Caparano Brothers, which supplied all the beverages at Fort Lewis. And so that was kind of an interesting thing, and got to know him, and that's how I got a job with him after the war for a while. But yeah, that's pretty much what happened to me. But as when I say get the GI Bill, so I decided, well, I'm going to go to college, but what should I do? And my dad said, well, you should go to a good college where you learn something. And so, yeah, but I'd really like to go to art college. And he said, oh, you probably should do something else, that's, because where's that going to get you? But I went on, I did. And so I went to 4 years. I looked up all things, of course, on the West Coast, and found out that the California College of the Arts and Oakland, and they had a good reputation. And so I put in for that college, and I ended up and got a four-year degree in art, and that really, in some ways, ended up where I met a guy that in one of the drawing classes that I became real good friends with. It was a drawing class where you had a live model. You know, we had live models to pose for you and so on. And there were a lot of kids, you know, Oakland, fairly wealthy area, kids coming out of high school, you know, that liked art went there. And anyway, so in one class there, in the drawing class, I noticed all the people seem to have little, like 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. They're drawing these to try to draw the figure, and I said, God, you know, this kind of, how can you do that? So I was drawing on a larger piece, and the instructor came around and he said, yeah, that's good. You know, he's trying to get these people to get large, because, you know, it's hard to really get everything from, and then, you know, you're modeling have a model, of course they have breaks, but, you know, for an hour, you know, so in an hour you can do quite a bit, but if you don't finish it, they may have the same model again the next time, and whatever. So I would start working on a bigger, larger piece of paper, and then finally I noticed this guy way off at the corner there, and he's got a huge piece of paper, and he's all by himself, you know. So at the break, we'd always have a break, and I'd go over there and look at his drawings. I thought, this guy can draw, you know, and I really liked what he's doing, so I got talking to him, and he's a Polish guy from South Bend, Indiana, and we kind of hit it off, and then we got friendly, and the relationship got to the point where we criticized each other, you know, and we were able to take it in good sense, and we were learning from each other, and the instructor was a great instructor, and he was trying to encourage a lot of the other people to draw, you know, and say, look at these two guys, and then he'd show the he said, you see, you can do a lot more and get everything than you can with these. So some people did, some didn't, but anyway, this relationship then actually when he came to graduation, well, I'd gotten to know him. His name was Zygmunt Jankowski, good Polish name, and he had met a girl there in school, and she was from Southern California, and they somehow fell in love, and before he graduated, they got married. And I said, what are you doing, Zig? And he said, well, she's a great gal and I love her, you know. And so, okay. So when we went to graduate, we got talking. He says, what are you going to do? And I said, where are you going to go? And I said, well, I guess I'll go back up to Tacoma, Washington, because that's where my folks are. And he said, hey, why don't you come back to South Bend? He said, I know I can get a job back there, and I have to because Lynn's pregnant. And I said, what? He said, yeah. You know, they had gotten married. And I said, well, great, congratulations. And I said, well, how do you know you can get a job? And he said, my whole family works at Studebaker. That's automobile. A lot of people had never heard of it before. It was a good automobile. But he told me that if your family worked there and somebody in the family needed a job, they would find a job for you. And I said, never heard of anything like that, you know, coming out of the Depression and so on as I had. So he said, yeah. And I said, well, if that's so good. But he said, why don't you come back? You'll find something to to get a job back there, and we can paint together. And Chicago is not that far, from South Bend, and there's a train that runs from, past South Bend to Chicago. It's not expensive. It's got great galleries and a great art institute, with famous paintings from all over the world, and we could learn and work together. So I talked to my folks, and they said, well, if that's what you want to do it. So anyway, it went back, and it turned out good, because I did get a job, and actually I learned a lot of things back there just by being, I was so interested in things. I was doing line inspection for Bendix, where they were doing 2 items for automobiles: backing brake, the backing disc for the automobile brake, and then the automobile carburetor. And I got a job. It's just visual. It's you don't have to be smart to do this. You're looking for defectives, defective pieces. They tell you what to look for. So I was on the one line, but it got boring. So I found out that there was the opening in the carburetor body, and this was a casting, and it was more complicated and so on. So I kind of liked that. I don't know why. Just because there was more things to look for and so on. So I got there, and the foreman was really great, but we had breaks during the day, 2, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Of course, we had lunch, and I think it was the lunch break one day after. Well, eventually I got off of the backing plate, got into carburetors, and we had, enough time where I could have my sandwich, and then I kind of wandered around, and the foreman in that department had a little office, just a small office with a desk, and I happened to walk by there at noontime, and I see all those blueprints on his desk. So I thought, that must be for the carburetor that we have. And I'm just standing there, not in his office, but on, and he comes up behind me, and he's looking at me. He finally says, what are you looking at? The drawings, the blueprints? And I said, yes. He, can you read blueprints? No. He said, well, why? I said, I'm just interested. He said, well, if you're interested, I'll, if you want to, take the time during break and lunchtime, I'll teach you how to read blueprints. And I said, you will? He said, sure. So I said, okay, great. So I don't know, it probably was about 3 weeks or so on, I don't know exactly, but each noon he'd give me a half an hour of my lunch, and his lunch, to show me and start teaching me how to read blueprints. And it just amazed me. And then what he said, you're just picking this up. I can't believe you're picking this up that fast. And I said, well, you're a good teacher, So he said, well, if, I would suggest to you that we have a school here, that now that you've learned something about reading the blueprints, you go to this school for 2 weeks, you get paid, and you'll learn how to use all the precision instruments, how to measure down to 1/1000th of an inch. Would you be interested? Yes, I would. So I went to that, and for 2 weeks, and so, gosh, it was just so interesting, and actually, that was really the way I just kind of started to learn that way. And I went to the school, and then I got a job there for a while, and then I joined the art league there, and Zig had got a job, and they bought a house, and Lynn had her baby, and so on. And so everybody was happy. And anyway, the long and short of it was, I ended up, we both had joined the Art League back in South Bend. And like all art leagues, at least once a year they have openings with all their students and so on, open to the public. And you know, it's Santa Cruz has it, Watsonville has it, you know, same thing. And you're a member, and you can show your work and so on, and you can maybe sell something. So anyway, it came up about Christmas time, and we were showing our work, and it was in an old big building that had been a dealership, I guess, at one time. And we were showing a long hallway. There was a bigger room, but I don't know, somehow we just got assigned there. So Zig and I are next to each other, and so he wanted to wander around. He said, "Why don't you stay here for a while, and then you can watch both of our things." And if he knew what he wanted for it, and I knew what he wanted for it, his paintings and so on. And if somebody wants something, you can go ahead and take care of it, and then I'll come back, and then you can go. And then right across from where we were on the other side, there were more tables, but nobody was around there. Well, there was one girl was there, and she was sitting right between these two watercolors, so I didn't know which one was hers, but for some reason I thought the one on her left was hers. Really pretty nice watercolors, and I don't do watercolors well. I like oils and so on, and anyway, so I keep looking at her. Not bad looking. She had this big fur coat on, and she looked kind of lonely. So I finally started up a conversation with her, and I said, "I like your watercolors." And she said, "Oh, thank you." You know, and I'm pointing at this, and she's sitting right behind, and she said, "Oh, that's not mine. This is mine." And so I look over there. I said, "Oh," and then I thought, "Oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I do?" You know, I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." You know, she said, "Oh, no, that's okay." She said, "Yeah, she's a lot better than I am," and it was another girl. Anyway, I just felt so stupid, and so I got talking to her, and learned that she had gone to the Rhode Island School of Design, which is, you know, in Rhode Island, and I went to the Oakland Art in California, which had a good reputation too. But anyway, we got talking, and you know, I apologized. She said, "Oh, don't worry about it." She says, "I know." She says, "I know that wasn't what I wanted." What she said, "I wanted to design clothing," but she said, "My instructors told me when I was before graduating, they had a program there where they try to help to get their students into some jobs, even though, you know, they may be low, but that way you can work your way up in whatever you were interested in." But they told her that she, you know, she was doing good in designing, but the fashion industry was a dog eat dog kind of thing to get into and so on. And they said, you know, don't try that. You'll be disappointed. Go out and get a portfolio going. Get a job in designing. There's lots of designing jobs. Get a job and then develop your portfolio. Then you'll find out which way you want to go. And that's what she did. Well, but anyway, the thing was that after I'd met her and so on, and then apologized, then I asked her for a date. And she said, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I'd like to go to the Notre Dame. It was, just right before Christmas. They used to have big games there at Notre Dame in South Bend, football game. So I told her, you look at football? Well, yeah, it's okay. Would you like to go? Yeah, sure. So anyway, found out where she was living. She was living with this family. They were pretty well off. They had, I think, a drugstore business of some sort. And they had taken Dee in. They had a daughter that was older than Dolores, but their daughter sort of went off the cliff. She got all kinds of problems and so on, and they were so disappointed. They wanted the best for her and so on, and yet they couldn't do anything for her because she wouldn't listen. And so they kind of adopted my wife. And so when I asked her for this date, she said, sure, and told me where to go. And so when I got there, I had a corsage in a box, but I had it behind me. And when I got there, the husband and wife, they look at me, I could see in their eyes, they were looking me over before they let me in. And I said, I didn't know what to do, so I have this thing, I bring this box here, and so when they see this, well, maybe he's all right. So so I even opened the thing, there's this big corsage in there. I said, okay, come on in. But they really looked at it, after her, like they were their own daughter. They were so disappointed, their own, and Dolores was really such a great gal. They really loved her. They got to love her. So anyway, that's how we got started. So anyway, I don't have really much else to tell you except that when we decided, we saw each other quite a bit, and so I decided, that I like South Bend. I like the people, but I just didn't like the weather. It's so cold and icy in the winter and so humid during the summer. It's just horrible. And so, when I asked, then we met some nice people there, the Petersons and so on, and that knew both of us. And so we had some friends, and then of course the Jankowskis. And so when I decided that I cared that much for her, that I'd asked her to marry me, and she said yes. So the thing was that we ended up we were both brought up as Catholics, and so that worked out for both families, and we got married there in the Catholic Church. My mother came from Tacoma, and of course my dad was working at the time, he couldn't go, and her family had come from Providence and so on. And so the thing was that when we got married, then I said to Dolores, I said, I just love the people here. They're so great, and we have so many friends, but I can't stand this weather, and I don't know, what I want to do here. I've got a job, yes, but, I'm just, how about you? And she said, I said, I really like California. And she said, oh, I got it. My sister, who was older, is out there. And she said, she's down at Moffett Field. And I said, I know where that is. Is it just south of Oakland? And she said, yes, she had married a Navy pilot, and he's stationed down there. And I'd like to see her. So sure, I'll go to California. So that's what started, and we came to California, and we had just a wonderful life. We were both showing both of our arts, and she did some just magnetic thing, they're just beautiful things, not painting. She took up sort of stitchery, and she did pictures and stuff. She would just start with yarn and so on, like in some background, even like I don't know, gunny sack or whatever, easy, but all kinds of material. And she would just start without a drawing or anything, and these things would just develop where she was using yarn and everything. And it just amazed me to see what she was doing. So then they're just, they're there, but they're, what do you do? They should be on the frame. So I was framing all my own things, making my own frames, and of course I could buy stretcher bars, but in some cases I even did that. So I start taking her things and then making frames for them and mounting that on there, and then making a frame around it and so on. And we start showing our work together all over the San Francisco Bay Area. And one year there, and we were doing pretty good and having just a lot of fun, meeting a lot of people. But what happened was that one year there, on the East Coast, there was a craft show. They called it a craft show, but it really all types of crafts was in it, and it was all they looked for people that were doing interesting things up and down the East Coast, and so it was a huge success. I don't know. I think it was off in New York or someplace there, and it was so successful that this group that started this and were so interested in doing it, they said, we ought to do this on the West Coast. And as it turned out, Ghirardelli Square, they weren't doing chocolate there anymore, but it was a nice big building, and they had a lot of space there, and there were some nice shops in there, but there was open space too, and they were putting on art shows at time. Well, this East Coast group contacted them about the space, got the space there, and then they start canvassing the whole West Coast for people that were doing crafts. And they saw some of Dee's working. They called her, asked her if she would join this, and of course she said yes. So she got into that show, and that just started it, and then she met other people, and then she and another gal started a gallery in San Francisco for a while. But it became a problem, traveling there all the time. It was very weary and so on. So they gave up on that. But then we showed a lot and had shows here, and actually in Santa Cruz, there's a very nice area with very wealthy people living up on the hills, and actually, she met some of these people that were doing crafts and this type of thing, and so we met people there too. So we showed our work, and she started teaching at night, and she was having just a great time. So we had just a wonderful life. The thing is that unfortunately, what happened here it's about 7 years now, a little bit more. Her doctor, very good doctor, Dr. Pates, female, saw something in Dee that bothered her and gave her a test, and she came up with Alzheimer's. And that's what happened. She developed Alzheimer's, and so I took care of her. I said, well, I'll just take care of her, that's all. Excuse me. Anyway, I took care of her 3.5 years. She became incontinent, she knew exactly, you know, she's a very smart gal. She did real estate for a while, and she it just bowled me over that she picked it up so fast that she wasn't satisfied for just being a realtor. She had to get a broker's license. So what do you need? You don't have got to open a shop or no, but I just wanted to be, you know, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it all the way. Okay, anyway, the thing was that when she knew exactly when her doctor told her that she had to stop driving, she loved to drive. You know, she didn't know when we got married, but she learned to drive. She learned to drive a stick shift. We had a little Alfa Romeo, which was a fun car to drive and so on. We were both working at the time. We just had such a great life. But, you know, life happens. And the thing is that she just gave up. She knew exactly what her future was going to be. So she used to exercise. She used to walk a lot. Every morning she'd walk our whole area up there, and then in the evening, even after she'd been working and so on before dinner. And but when she was diagnosed, she just stopped. She wouldn't do anything, and so after a while, you know, she lost a lot of strength in her legs because she wouldn't get up and even walk hardly. I had to almost pick her up and get her. I said, "You've got to keep moving around," but she said, "Why? What's it going to do?" But what happened was that when she became incontinent, I decided I'm going to take care of her, and I did for 3.5 years. But what happened that when she became incontinent, our house was not on one level. It's like 2 steps up and 2 steps down, and so on. Anyway, the thing that happened was that when she was actually losing strength in her legs. I guess because I was having a terrible time trying to get her up these 2 little steps to get to the bathroom. And I told her, "Sweetie, you've got to try to help. You've got to try to help." And, you know, she didn't. And we fell once. Well, fortunately, we didn't get hurt. You know, I wrapped my arms around her and so on, and just fell on the floor. But the second time we were higher, and she somehow leaned back, and that time we went back, and there's a counter right. There's just a little space, and then a counter, and I hit it with my back, and we fell down there, and oh boy, did that hurt. And I thought, what am I going to do if I broke my back? And it hurt so much, and I tried to get up. I was having a terrible time because she was just laying there. She didn't get hurt or anything because I supported her. But the thing is that after that, I told her, I said, "Look, you've got to help me, sweetie, you've got to help me." Well, it happened again, and that time I hit the counter. And, well, the first time I didn't, the second time I did. At that time I said, you know, not good, not good. I'm either going to cripple us or kill us or something. And I'd already set up a trust and all this. And she agreed. She knew all, you know, when she was, and so, and I set up a trust and so on. And then we didn't have children. We tried, but it didn't work. And anyway, no close family. She had some nephews, but we weren't seeing them at all. And I didn't have any relatives. So we set up a fiduciary. I set up a fiduciary area and so on. But after the second time, I just felt I couldn't do this anymore before we somehow really injure ourselves. So, you know, I checked out the state about you know, a place for someone like her, and then also heard from her doctor, who was a great doctor. She's a woman doctor, Dr. Pates, and I talked with her, and she had said she knew of this place that and had already talked with the state, and they told me about a number of them, but the closest one was the one in our area, and anyway, her doctor knew about it, and because she had patients there already, so she thought it was a good place, and so that's what I did. I checked them out, talked to them and everything. So that's where she is, and they take good care of her, and you know, I see her as much as I can, but I have to take care of the house. I can't go over every day and so on, but I go as often as I can, and sometimes she's sleeping and she won't, you know, she doesn't wake up, so I just sit there, and other times she does, but it's hard to understand her, and she just talks so softly, but that's my life now, and so I don't know what else I can tell you about myself.
Well, Steve, how do you think that your time in the service, how did that affect your life overall?
The time in the service?
Yeah, how did it affect your life?
Well, I think it strengthened me in a way, you know, because you see a lot, you learn a lot, and I think the service is, you know, a good thing, not for everybody maybe, but it's not a bad thing, you know, and I feel that I learned a lot from it. You know, I think that you can't experience something like that and not, well, I guess some people can, but I can't visualize not learning things from, you know, what happened, because you see not just for yourself, but what other people has gone through and so on, and for these people, the soldiers, Marines, and the Navy, but gosh, those people gave their lives for us. What more can you do? So, I don't know. I'm thankful that I had those experiences, because it's helping me, I think, to get through some of the tough times. And then, you know, then you have somebody like this guy here, you know, that's working with the veterans. You gotta, you know, he does a great job. I don't know what else I can tell you.
I had a few questions, yeah, just to go back a little bit. Most of our questions you kind of followed along without us even having to ask them a script pretty far until we got to the point of while you were in the military. Did you stay in touch with your family at all, like your parents, when you were in the service?
Oh yeah, because I could write letters, you know, and they would send them, you know, they'd go in a big bag, and you know, it'd take a long time before your, you know, parents, and so yeah, I had contact with them, and I tried to keep contact because I knew that they would worry, and so you know, I just little notations and so on, and I didn't have to tell them about, you know, I just tell them how I'm doing and so on. I'm doing all right, you know, I'm feeling good, I'm eating good, and so on, and I wouldn't try to explain the war to them or anything like that, but I just kept writing little notes all the time, and then when I got home, my mother she saved all the little notes.
I was also curious about how, you know, before you enlisted or before you went into the service, you looked at the Army or the Marines and you said, I don't want to be out there eating outside in the rain and all that.
I didn't see the Marines, but the Army,
right?
Yeah.
The Army. So was the food any different in the Navy then, or what was that?
Well, you know, it's just the fact that I never had to eat my food out in the rain. You'd always go down to the mess hall, you know. You know, on a destroyer, even there, you have enough people that everybody can't go at the same time. Somebody has to be on watch. Somebody has to be running the ship and all that. And so, you know, you go down there, and there's plenty, and they had, the food was good enough. You know, there were some people that complain, but there's always complainers.
Right.
I don't care what you do, you know, but it was, you know, not bad food or anything. Of course, the officers ate better than the enlisted people, but actually, you know, I have no complaints about, you know, shipboard and so on. And I was fortunate to be with a group of people. There were some people that got into it with each other on board ship, but there was always somebody around that stopped it right away. And but in our group, the signalman, and our group, radar and sonar, up on the bridge, you know, we just made good friends and so on. And actually, what happened that after we, when we were coming back for overhaul, you know, the thing was that we were down we came down very down in the South Pacific, and it's really hot sometimes at night, and you have this, what am I trying to say? A hammock, the hammock. Well, you know, you rolled it all up and you had a sea bag and all, but where, you know, nobody was using their hammock on ship. But when I was up there on radar and sonar, I got good friends with the first class flagman, and he's on our same place. He's got all his flags and everything, and we're up there with the bridge things. So there's all these struts and everything, and I was complaining about being right back on the what they call it, the fantail, the end of the rear of the ship, almost right under the deck, because the bunks were like about 3 high or so, I forgot, 3 or 4 high, and then the deck's right here, and that heat is and if you have that hot, you know, the top deck is terrible. So anyway, I had that there, and so the signalman said, "Bring me your hammock. You know, it's all rolled up in your bag." So I brought up there. He hung it up there under the bridge that's hanging out. It's hanging out there. You could get up on the safety lines and then get into it. But you have to be really careful that you don't fall down, you know, because the deck is way down. There's nothing to catch you there. But I was sleeping, and I got in that hammock, and I slept in there, you know, and none of the officers complained. I thought, well, hey, you can't do that. They won't let you. Oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Okay, fine.
And I imagine with all the stress of being at war and whatnot, you probably look forward to some time of any kind of entertainment. When you were out on the boat, did you guys do anything in particular to amuse yourselves?
Well, of course, when you're away, you know, sometime when we were down, you know, away from the what's really going on, sometimes they would, you know, have a movie, or, you know, and there were times when we'd have to go down to pick up the repair ship. There was this huge, it looked like a liner, but they had hospital ships down, you know, we're in the safe zone in the South Pacific, rather than the northern part where the war was moving, you know, north. And so they were they were down in this area, and the ship that they had all the machinery on there. They could make almost any part that you would need, on any ship, and then they carried parts too. And these guys really had it good, because they were there. But then there's this little island that they were right next to, right there. You could, they parked off, but then they take the whaleboat, and then they'd go over, and then this little place, and it had a lot of trees in there, and they had beer there. The Navy, had some beer, so you could go there and get a glass of beer. You couldn't, they wouldn't give you very much. They'd give you a ticket, little cuts, and what you could do. But what these guys on this ship, the Dixie, man, did they have it good. What they did, I don't know how many of them were involved, but you get on the whaleboat, they put it down, and then they motor over to this little island, you get on the little landing, and you start walking away, and then all of a sudden you hear this noise and stuff in there, and then off it goes to your left. You go into this grove of trees, and there's a big opening in there, and these guys from the Dixie, they're gambling. They've got all the they're making the money. Some of those guys would have came home rich. They did, because you can't win on all the, you could win sometime, but it's like any gambling machine, or Tahoe, whatever you want to go. They make the money and so on. But it was real interesting. But there they had, like a place that you could play baseball. They had, a little diamond and all that kind of stuff. It was a recreation island. So it was nice coming to the Dixie to get something you needed for repair or whatever. And then they'd put up a big screen down there too at night. And but most of the time you had it on board ship. They just put up a screen on the tailback of the ship and show some sort of movie or something. But that's when you're really out of the war zone, though.
Right.
I like it. I can't think of anything else. Thanks for remembering that. I was just riveted. Anything else you want to add?
Haven't I talked long enough?
No, it's great because you in such detail, and that paints the picture for us.
Well,
thank you so much.
You're
really
welcome.
Appreciate it.
Well, I don't know about painting a picture because I am a painter, and an artist, and so on. But I don't think of myself as be able to work with words as well as some people can. But
I had one last one. If you had any other things that you want to share for future service members in the military, if anything that you would like to say to them.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's really a matter of your attitude. How you approach life, and really it comes down to you have to make the decisions of what's right for you, but you can't dictate all the time. You have to realize that there are limits and there are rules and so on, and so you have to follow them. And if you do, you won't get in any trouble. And that's the big thing. If you get too crazy, you're going to get in a lot of trouble, and that's there's no trouble. There's nothing else that you don't want to get in trouble anyway. But I don't know. I'm not used to talking about all this type of thing, but Dean seemed to think I should do this. And I really respect, he's a great guy. He's working for the veterans, and he's doing a great job. He's doing everything that he can. And of course, the veterans, they've had a lot of problems, and there's a lot of people. There's been enough wars, and unfortunately, there's still a few of us from World War II, still hanging around. But it's, I can't say enough good things about Dean, because his heart is really in it. It's just not a job. So I thank you, Dean.
It's a pleasure, Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate it. It's an honor.